A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran.
When Iran and Israel went to direct war in late February 2026, it was a shock. But what came next was far worse and grimly predictable. The war didn't just stay between two nations, it became a regional inferno. In a matter of days, missile alerts weren't just sounding in Tel Aviv and Tehran, but in Riyadh, Dubai, and Doha. How did a targeted strike on Iran lead to battles in Lebanon, American casualties in Kuwait, and the near total shutdown of the world's most critical energy choke point? This wasn't an accident. It was a chain reaction where every strike had a consequence, and every retaliation widened the battlefield. Let's connect the dots and show you the precise sequence of attacks and counterattacks that turned the entire Middle East into a war zone. This is how the spark became a wildfire. The conflict kicked off on February 28, 2026. After weeks of a massive US military buildup and failed last-ditch diplomacy, the United States and Israel launched a coordinated attack on Iran, dubbed Operation Epic Fury by the Americans. It was designed as a decapitation strike, meant to cripple Iran's leadership and military in one swift blow. In the opening hours, nearly 900 joint strikes were carried out. Around 200 Israeli jets hit over 500 targets in what was called the largest air raid in the history of the Israeli Air Force. At the same time, American B-2 stealth bombers, warships, and ground-based launchers hit fortified missile sites, air defenses, and command centers across Iran. The most significant target was hit in that first salvo, in Tehran. Strikes on the leadership compound killed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. US and Israeli officials quickly confirmed his death, a move they hoped would throw the Iranian regime into chaos from the very beginning. But this decapitation didn't lead to capitulation. It led to retaliation on a scale few had anticipated. The first domino was Iran's promise of an overwhelming response. It came less than 24 hours later. On March 1st, Iran unleashed a torrent of hundreds of ballistic missiles and thousands of drones. While many were aimed at Israel, causing damage in cities like Jerusalem, the real escalation was where else they were aimed. For the first time, Iran launched a coordinated assault against US military assets hosted in several nations across the region. Missiles and drones targeted bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE, shattering the illusion of security in the Gulf. Civilian infrastructure was also caught in the crossfire, with airports in Dubai and Abu Dhabi targeted and debris igniting fires in Doha. Iran's message was clear: if we're under attack, no one in the region who hosts our attackers is safe. The second domino was the American and Israeli counter-retaliation, which now had a much wider map. The US confirmed the first American casualties of the war after an Iranian drone struck a base in Kuwait, killing 6 service members. In response, US strikes intensified, hitting not just missile sites inside Iran, but also the proxies that give Iran its regional power. This led to the third domino, igniting conflicts across the region. In Lebanon, after Hezbollah launched rockets at northern Israel in retaliation for Khamenei's death, Israel responded with withering airstrikes on southern Lebanon and Beirut's suburbs. Israel issued evacuation orders for dozens of villages, and by March 5th, it launched a ground incursion into southern Lebanon, turning the border into a full-blown front. The fourth domino fell in Iraq. When the US struck facilities belonging to Iran-backed popular mobilization forces, it dragged Iraq directly into the crossfire. Iran, in turn, launched missiles at what it claimed were hostile groups in northern Iraq, seen as aligning with Israel. This turned Iraq into a battleground for a proxy war between the US and Iran, threatening to tear the fragile state apart. Finally, the conflict spread to the sea. An advisor to Iran's IRGC declared the Strait of Hormuz closed, threatening to set fire to any ship that tried to pass. While it's unclear if a full closure was practically achievable, reports of attacks on tankers soon followed. Global shipping companies started suspending passage through the strait, the artery for a fifth of the world's oil, causing energy prices to spike. The war wasn't just on land anymore, it was now choking the global economy. So why did this spiral happen? Why didn't the war stay contained? The truth is, this wasn't a new war. It was the public eruption of a long and bloody shadow war. For years, Iran has pursued a strategy of forward defense, building a network of powerful proxy forces across the Middle East, known as the axes of resistance. Groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and various militias in Iraq and Syria were trained and funded to give Iran strategic depth and the ability to project power far beyond its borders. When the US and Israel struck Iran directly, the regime's playbook dictated activating this entire network. Attacking US bases across the Gulf wasn't a random act of vengeance. It was a calculated strategy to raise the cost of the war for Washington and its allies. It was meant to prove that an attack on Iran is an attack on the entire region. The United States' own objectives also fueled the spread. President Trump stated the goal wasn't just to prevent a nuclear weapon, but to eliminate imminent threats and give the Iranian people a chance to take over their government. This expansive goal of regime change meant the campaign couldn't be limited to a few nuclear sites. It required dismantling Iran's entire security apparatus, which, by definition, includes its regional proxies. Every US strike on a proxy group in Iraq or Syria was seen by Iran as another front in its existential war, demanding another response. The pre-existing instability of the region was the tinder for this fire. The conflict in Lebanon didn't come from nowhere. It was built on years of tension. The chaos in Iraq was a powder keg waiting for a spark. The attacks on Gulf states were possible because of the massive concentration of US military power hosted there for decades. By the end of the first week, the war had entered a brutal new phase. While the initial US and Israeli onslaught of nearly 900 strikes in 12 hours was followed by hundreds more, and the death toll in Iran had climbed past 1,300, Iran showed no signs of capitulating. Instead, its hardline elements doubled down, vowing to continue the fight and stretching the conflict across time and space. This complex web of alliances, proxies and strategic vulnerabilities is what makes the Middle East so volatile. Understanding these connections is the only way to make sense of the headlines. If you want to continue to get clear, in-depth analysis that goes beyond the surface, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. The 2026 war between Iran and Israel became a regional catastrophe not by mistake, but by design. It was the inevitable result of a direct strike on a regime that had spent decades embedding itself across the Middle East. The chain reaction was predictable because the dominoes had been set up long ago. A strike on Iran led to retaliation against US bases, which drew in the Gulf states. Counter-strikes on proxies ignited Lebanon and Iraq. The shadow war came out into the open, and the entire region was plunged into the blaze. The fundamental question now is, with the initial shock of the campaign over and Iran's leadership reorganizing for a long fight, how does this end? With no clear off-ramp and both sides seemingly committed to total victory, the war for the Middle East has only just begun.